Hi everyone, I'm Kevin from Goin Batty.
And I'm Heather.
And I'm Bill from, how did I get here? I'm from Tiny House Prepper.
Kidnapped him.
Well, we've got a video for you. We're going to sit down with one of the best preppers we know, and we're going to learn a little bit, just a snapshot of what Bill knows about prepping. Heather and I are beginning to get more familiar with it and beginning to understand the need for that. And Bill's here to share with us a snippet of his wisdom and a ton of knowledge, and we're going to share that with you in this video. And then what we'd really love you to do is to check out more of his videos over at Tiny House Prepper, because there's a whole series, and we'll talk about that later on in this video. So for now, check this out. We oftentimes think food, water, and shelter, but that's all mixed up. That's not the right order, and Bill's going to set us straight on it.
Yeah, when people first start thinking about prepping, that's what everybody says. You need food, water, and shelter, and that's true. But that's totally backwards. You need shelter, water, and food. Because especially if you live up here in the north where it gets cold, in the winter, if you don't have shelter, there's a good chance you won't survive the night.
This is true.
So shelter is the most important thing, and I would like to say warm shelter.
Yeah.
Though you can survive if you're prepared. In my younger days, I was a mountaineer, and I did a lot of mountain climbing and ice climbing and that sort of thing in 10 below, camping out in 10 below.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
And also,
That's awesome.
when
cold.
I was in the Army, thank God I was never in combat. I got out. I retired before the Iraq thing started. But
Okay.
we would go to the field in the winter for winter training, and we'd be out there for 2 weeks, and it'd be 10 below every night. So I know that it's possible to survive that. You just have to have the right kind of equipment, 10 below sleeping bags and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so the shelter is really the most important, because if you're in the middle of the winter, you might not survive the night. The next most important thing is water, because you can only survive 3 or 4 days without water. Food, you can survive several weeks or several months without food. So think of food, water, and shelter, but do it the other way. Shelter, water, and food. So as far as the food, we have a little saying with prepping that, well, first of all, a lot of people, when they first start thinking about prepping, they go out and, I got to get some food for long-term storage, so they go out and buy 50 pounds of beans and rice.
Yeah.
Now,
That's a lot of beans and rice.
I know people personally who have done that. And I ask, well, what do you do with it? How do you cook it? I don't know. Beans and rice, you can live on it. It makes a perfect protein when you combine them together. But you will get so sick of that so fast, it's unbelievable. So the saying in prepping is, store what you eat and eat what you store.
Okay.
Because you store the way that you eat. That's what you store, so that when emergency comes, you won't be looking at beans and rice saying, now what do I do with this?
Yeah.
You'll know how to do it. And then eat what you store, because you have to rotate stuff. So store it on the top, and take it from the bottom to eat it on a daily basis, and you rotate it through that way.
That way it doesn't go bad.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes great sense.
So, do you know of anything that you can use that you would store what you eat?
I actually do.
Yeah.
Thrive Life Foods, of course.
Thrive Life is wonderful. We're consultants with them, as well as Kevin, and we use Thrive in probably 60 to 70% of our daily cooking.
Yep.
So if we have an emergency and we have to tap on our long-term storage, it's just like we're eating on a daily basis, because that's what we use anyway.
Absolutely.
So also there are two different types of emergencies to prep for: short-term and long-term.
Okay.
Two totally different ways that you do it.
Okay.
Last winter we had a storm come through, an ice storm, and it knocked out all the power for about a week. So we thought, well, this is a perfect time for us to test our system to see how it works. And of course I put that all on YouTube, and I told everybody what was happening.
Yeah.
And the water and all that kind of stuff. And so many people came back and said, well, when you knew the storm was coming, you should have started storing water, in advance. And we were testing our long-term system. Storing water in advance when you know a storm coming is a short-term prep. Because how much water can you store?
Yeah.
A week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, and then what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, and people were saying, when I mentioned I didn't have any way to charge my cell phone, people said, well, you can just go out in your car and charge it out there. On the short term, yes.
Yeah.
But if there's no gasoline and your battery's going to go dead eventually,
Yep.
you can't charge it.
That's
so
right.
I'm thinking long term. If you get the long term plans in place, short term takes care of itself.
Yeah. That
But
makes
if
a lot
you
of sense.
plan for short term, then after 2 weeks, what are you going to do?
Mhm.
So think more long term.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I had not put together the short term versus the long term because in Ohio we face similar weather to you, and so some of the things that we deal with have been short term. But we were Heather and I were specifically faced with it in this house several years ago when we lost all power. There was the water wasn't even running. I don't believe.
No, the water was running. It was actually the remnants of hurricane
Oh yeah,
that came
yeah.
through, and we had some really strong winds, and it knocked out our power for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and it really made us think, how are we really ready? And
We weren't.
we were not.
We were not ready.
So, and water is a big issue. Obviously, you need it. You know, you're not going to survive. So, you know, some preppers talk about, oh, I got all this water stored in the basement and all that. Well, that's good, but if you're going to store water, you have to rotate it for one thing, because it does go bad after a while.
Absolutely.
But how much water do you actually have stored? What if we have the dollar crashes and we ended up with a worldwide economic crash that lasts a year and a half? How much water do you have stored? So, what do we do for water? We have a stream about a half mile away,
Oh yeah.
and I have a Berkey water filter, and I have a trailer behind my bicycle, and 2 5-gallon buckets, like spackle buckets, you know, with
Yeah.
a lid on them. So I can drive my bike down to the stream, I fill up 10 gallons and put them in the trailer, bring them home, run them through the Berkey filter. We have all the water we need year round, because even in the winter we have one spot in that creek where there's rapids, and even at 10 below, 15 below, it doesn't freeze.
Oh wow.
So I can go right there and get cold water,
That's yeah.
bring it home, run it through the Berkey, and we're good to go. That's a long-term solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your situation is, but come up with some kind of a long-term solution.
Well, and it's interesting because in our context, we need to take the time to think through what does that look like, because we are in an urban environment,
Yeah.
and there's not streams in our backyard. There's not even flowing water that you even remotely want to drink. So even a life straw might be more realistic to use. But this is the things that we need to start thinking about. These are the things that we need to tackle, which is why we're so blessed to be having this conversation.
Now, I will also say that I think really, truly prepping in an urban environment is much more difficult.
Oh yeah.
You know, because we
For
have
sure.
resources out in the country that you just don't have here.
Yeah.
That's right.
You know, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could take care of the big three, shelter, warm shelter, water, and food, then most people would stop there. Okay, I'm good. There are all kinds of other things you need to prep for, and I'm going to go through some of them, and I'm not going to be able to give you solutions. I don't have 6 hours.
No.
I'm just going to tell you the categories so you can start to think about them.
But that's the whole point, to get us thinking.
Right.
We want to spur thought so that we can start being prepared and tackle it on our own. And that's the beauty of you sharing these things with us, is to get us figuring this stuff out on our own.
Exactly, because everybody's going to have a different solution based on their situation.
Absolutely.
So now in your house you have what we call systems. You might call them categories. I like to call it a system. The first big system is the kitchen, and this includes, okay, so you got food, how are you going to cook? If you have an electric range and the power goes out, how are you going to cook? If you have a propane range and you're in the town, you probably have a propane pipe coming in from the street somewhere, and if that stops, how are you going to cook? Out in the country, we have propane tanks sitting out back, and I can have as much as a year's worth of propane stored out there just for cooking.
Awesome.
Another solution is a rocket stove. A rocket stove, you can cook a meal on a pile of twigs about this big.
Yeah.
You know anything about a rocket stove? You seen it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can just go around in your urban environment and pick up twigs and get enough to cook a stove. So if you don't know what that is, we have a video about it, or you can just go to YouTube and just put in rocket stove and you'll find them.
Yeah.
So how do you cook? How do you wash dishes? Do you have enough soap? How long does a bottle of dish soap last? You probably use a dishwasher. So you don't have a clue how long a bottle of dish soap lasts if you're just washing dishes by hand.
That's a good point.
But these are things to think about.
Yeah.
Kitchen appliances like a blender. You know, do you use an not a blender, a mixer?
Mixer.
Do you use an electric mixer, or you can use a crank one?
Oh yeah.
Now, if you have some kind of a solar system to produce electricity, then you can still use all of your electric stuff. But we have all manual stuff. We have a manual can opener, we have a manual mixer, we have a manual blender that clamps on there and you can crank it. All manual stuff.
I never thought about that.
We don't use that. We like our electric.
Sure.
We have it all set aside, but it's there for when we need it. Okay, another system is sanitation, which includes, the main thing is obviously showers and toilet. What are you going to do for personal hygiene to keep yourself clean? What are you going to do for a toilet? If you live out in the country, you might be able to, dig an outhouse.
Yeah.
Or you can do a composting toilet.
We can do a composting toilet. This has been a great discussion in our house because we have one bathroom, and I am constantly cut off to use the bathroom. And we've been talking about a composting toilet.
He has been talking about a composting toilet. I told him, unless it's an emergency, I'm not pooping in a bucket.
Well, they do have inexpensive composting toilets.
Right.
And they are sanitary. They're very sanitary.
Right. So there are many different solutions, and I'm not going to go through all of those. The point is, think about it. What are you going to do for shower or bath to keep yourself clean? What are you going to do about a toilet? Toilet paper. Do you know how much toilet paper your family uses in a month?
We use so much toilet paper.
That's a lot of toilet paper.
That's a lot of toilet paper. We
Look
buy
out.
the big packs at Costco and they're gone. Like, yeah that's
You
a
got to
lot.
empty out that shed out there so you have a place
It's
to.
a lot of toilet paper.
That's a lot of toilet paper for this Goin Batty clan.
But think about it ahead of time. Don't get caught, using poison ivy leaves.
Oh, jeez.
And that's where understanding your plants comes into play.
Right? Yeah.
So when you're foraging, you know other ways and things that you need to forage for.
Now, toothpaste. You can use baking soda and those kinds of things, but toothpaste. Do you know how long a tube of toothpaste lasts? Any idea?
No.
Elizabeth and I use different brands of toothpaste, so we each have our own.
Okay.
So I got one of the large family ones for me, and I put the date on it when I started using it, and when it was empty, I looked at it, it was 1 week short of 6 months.
Oh, wow.
That large tube, family tube, lasted for one person.
Ours lasts a week. Ours will last a week.
Oh,
We
wow.
can get a big tube of toothpaste to last a week in our
That's
house.
amazing.
So, yeah.
But for me, since one big tube lasts me 6 months, if I have the one that I'm using and 2 spares and I rotate them, I always use the oldest one, and I have 18 months worth of toothpaste for me.
But we have to keep.
But the key is to know how long it lasts, how much you use.
Yeah, we have to keep our boys from eating it. So that's the other key.
Oh,
too.
yeah, okay.
When
That's
they
wrong. You
use
should
it.
eat toothpaste.
No.
It even says on it, don't eat this, don't ingest.
And then this is pretty self-explanatory. I won't go into it, but feminine needs. Think about what you need. Make sure you got enough.
I'll be letting them do that. That's out of my ballpark. Honey?
Diapers.
Yep.
Do you use exclusively disposable diapers? Nowadays, everybody does. You think of a cloth diaper, and it's like, ew, that's so disgusting. When I was a kid, when I was a baby, that's all my mother had.
That's all we used to.
And when my kids were little, disposables were coming in, but they were expensive, so we only used them when we were out traveling. We'd use them in church and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When we were home, we used cloth. Nowadays, you can still get cloth, but hardly anybody uses them. But in an emergency, you're going to want them.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
think about that. Pets. Do you have pets? What do they eat? Do you have enough food for them? Do you give them your table scraps, or do you have, pet food for them?
Yeah. Yeah. We've always joked that we would probably eat the dog first.
No, we eat the cat first because
Oh.
he's fatter.
It makes a nice lip balm, but anyway, that's just inappropriate. The thing about the prepping and pets is you really have to weigh what the most important thing is, and we all love our pets and we all think they're important, but at some point you have to go, okay, how important are they? Because I don't know that we would be able to prep for everything on that huge list. I mean, you get me past toilet paper and I've won. You know, we start talking about how much pet food you need in just a short-term scenario. That's a good question.
Well, I think it's that you prep for like the kids first, and then the pets come after that. For us, that's how it would be probably.
Okay, good deal.
Transportation. In a long-term situation, there's probably not going to be gasoline, which means you're stuck with horses. Wait a minute, there's no horses. You're stuck with walking. How far can you walk? What if you have to carry something? Like for us, I didn't talk about this when I was talking about a warm shelter. We live in a tiny house. We live in a 32-foot travel trailer, 250 square feet. We have a wood stove that we heat the thing with. It's about this big. It's the size of a small toaster oven.
Awesome.
It's really cool.
And I have to cut the pieces into 6-inch logs to put in there. But if I have to go, see, we live out in the woods, so I have limited amount of fuel for free, except for my elbow grease, to chop it up, that I can heat my place all winter. But if there's no gasoline, how am I going to get out to the woods to haul the logs in? You know, carrying them like this, 2 at a time. That's where my bicycle with the trailer comes in, because the bicycle is transportation. I have done, just for fun, long-term bicycle tours where I would take 2 weeks and do 800 or 900 miles.
Oh, that's cool.
I do 100 miles a day on a bicycle, and that's very possible.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Once you actually start riding, it's very possible, and so bicycle is good transportation.
Yeah.
The trailer I have is called a Bob, a B-O-B, Beast of Burden. It has 1 wheel instead of 2.
Oh, wow.
So it tracks right behind you, like going down a trail in the woods. So I can ride my bike with the trailer down into the woods. I can cut firewood, put it in the trailer, and bring it back.
Oh, that's
or
good.
bring the wood back. Or, you know, even if it's not an emergency, if you want to go grocery shopping and you want the exercise and you want to save some money on gas and help the environment, right?
Yeah.
Take your bicycle with the Bob trailer to the grocery store, and then you can load your groceries in there to bring it home.
Yeah. Remember the bike trailer we had with the kids?
Oh yeah, that you stuck the kids in the back.
Yeah, that would be another. If you don't have the, I'm thinking about balance here. If you don't have the balance to keep the Bob going, you could. If you, most of us have some of those left over from where our kids are smaller. You could just load those up and fill those up with water or food.
Yeah, so you can use whatever bicycle trailer you have or you can get. You can find them in flea markets for next to nothing.
Oh yeah.
I like the Bob because it has 1 wheel, and so I can take it down a narrow trail.
Oh,
and the Bob, it doesn't have a pivot on it. So when the bike leans, the trailer leans, and it just follows you right like that.
Oh, cool.
So you can't even tell it's there.
Awesome.
When you're riding.
Awesome. All right.
So anyway, yeah. So transportation and hauling capability with the bicycle. Security. That's a big thing. You know. I was really excited when I saw this new show that came out that was called Doomsday Preppers. I thought, great, I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff. That was so sensationalized, and it gave preppers such a bad name. You know, many of them had full armories with howitzers and tanks and everything else for their security, you know, Claymore mines and all this stuff. That's ridiculous.
That's not really what you're talking about.
No. Your biggest tool as far as security is to remain anonymous. Don't let anyone else know what you're doing. Because if everybody in your neighborhood knows what you're doing, then you're going to be raided the first day. But if nobody has any idea that you have 2 years worth of food stored down in your basement and that you have all of this stuff, that's your biggest tool in security.
Wise. I never thought about that.
Now, you know, as far as firearms, if you want to do that, by all means do that. But that's not. I mean, you're going to get yourself in a shootout. Yeah. You know, and if it's when the whole world crashes, I call it an EOW, end of the world, an EOW scenario. Yeah. Or there's what I call EOW light, which is if the power
has less calories.
Yeah. If the power is out and there's no food available in the grocery stores because there's no gasoline, but society is still pretty much together, we still have the police and all that kind of stuff, that's an EOW light. Okay. EOW, full-blown EOW is like the end of the world, every man for himself, dystopian society. Gotcha. But in an EOW light, if you pull out your gun and you shoot somebody, the cops are going to be there. You know, to me that's not a solution.
No.
You know,
it gets you in worse trouble.
Right. So I mean, like I said, you do what you want, but to me, the biggest thing that you can do with security is just don't let anybody know what you're doing. Don't let anybody know what your preps are.
Be anonymous.
Be anonymous. Stay under the radar.
Awesome.
Yeah. Light sources in your house. If you can have a solar system, that's great. More and more people are doing that all the time, but there's certainly some expense to that, and also talking about being under the radar, you're not under the radar if you got all this solar stuff up on your roof.
Right.
You know, so lanterns, old-fashioned oil lanterns. You can still get them in like decorative shops, craft shops, and those sorts of things.
Amish stores sell them.
Yeah.
They're like we have Amish here in Ohio, and you can like any place that sells to the Amish has those.
Right. Now, obviously, they're not as light as bright electric lights, but you have one or two in every room, and that oil lasts forever. Obviously, you have to store some oil, but it lasts a long time.
Yeah.
So, you know, lanterns, candles, you can also get solar rechargeable flashlights and lanterns. You just set them in the window every day, and then they'll charge, and you can use them at night.
And that seems like a resource that makes sense on so many different levels. If you're, even if everything's fine, using that versus flipping on a light switch could save you some bucks when you're talking about your electric bill.
Right.
And that's one thing that Heather and I haven't really delved into, but what about in our kids' rooms, in our room where we have all these lights on, what if we use solar powered, they're self-sustaining, they're in the
Camping section.
camping section, or in a bag, you just hang them and they're good to go.
Right.
So something like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and with the lanterns, you can just turn the lights off and turn the lanterns on for more ambiance, a romantic evening in front of the TV or whatever.
There you go.
When I was a kid, we were so poor we didn't have any electricity, and we had to watch television by candlelight.
And there was someone in the background cranking the TV.
Okay, another system, laundry. How are you going to do laundry? There are hand crank laundry machines that you can get. It's a barrel about this big around, and you can put in more than it seems like you could, and you can hand crank them, and it washes that way.
And then some are foot pedals.
Small loads, but you can do it that way.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, if you can't find it or don't want to spend the money, an old-fashioned 5-gallon bucket and a toilet plunger.
Yeah.
Make sure it's one you haven't used in the toilet. Buy a new toilet plunger and you just plunge it. Put water in there and just plunge it. And get your laundry that clean that way.
We've been watching that on some of the RV shows. We've been watching some of the RV channels that are taking laundry to a whole different level, because they don't want to necessarily use the park's laundry system, and so they actually have a 5-gallon bucket and a plunger, and that's how they do their laundry just there at their campsite.
Right. Yep.
So.
Another thing that most people don't think about is entertainment, especially if you have younger kids and there's no power and they can't watch the TV, they can't watch their whatever they're doing on their iPhones or whatever. And everybody's sitting around with a couple of lanterns. What are you going to do? Kids at night in the dark, especially in the winter, are going to go crazy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So think about some kind of entertainment. Have a bunch of board games, wonderful family time together around a lantern, Popcorn. Oh yeah. Popcorn is cheap, and it's relatively good for you compared to many other snacks.
Yeah.
And it'll last, it'll store forever, and it's fun.
Yep.
So, have popcorn and a bunch of games.
It's amazing to me though how many people don't know how to do popcorn not in a microwave. Like we don't do it because we have to pop like 4 bags of popcorn for our family, and we just get the popcorn kernels and we pop it over the stove.
Or Redenbacher.
Yep, and that's what we use. And but I remember saying that to somebody one time. They're like, "Well, how do you do that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? How do you do that?"
Put it in a pan with some oil and put a lid on it.
Yep, put a lid on it.
And that goes back to making sure you have the supplies.
Yeah.
Make sure you're saving back the oil that you need. Make sure you're saving back the propane that you need to pop the popcorn over the fire to even have the popcorn or the oil.
And if you run out of cooking oil for your popcorn, you can't use the lantern oil, sorry.
No.
Ew, yuck.
Maybe that's what we need to save the cat for.
Jeez, Kevin.
I'm sorry.
So you can have a variety of different kinds of board games. If the kids are old enough to teach them some card games, even, you know, simple card games, it can really be a bonding time for the family.
Yeah,
as well as keeping the kids from going crazy.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay, we live in an increasingly digital age, and increasingly more and more people are keeping all of their records in digital format. I recommend keeping hard copies of everything. Print them off, because, you know, in a crash, your computers might not be available, and you might have some very important information that you can't get to.
Right.
So, really important stuff. Keep hard copies.
Got it.
So that's kind of the basis. The main thing is walk around your house, walk into every room, and pay attention to what you're doing.
Okay.
And every time you're doing something, think, how would I do this if there was no power?
Yeah.
How would I do that if there was no gasoline? I have a chainsaw to cut up my firewood for my little stove. How am I going to do it if there's no gasoline for my chainsaw?
You gotta have a handsaw.
I have a couple of really big hand saws.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Think about everything you're doing and think, how would I do this in an emergency when there's no water, there's no electricity, there's no gasoline, there's no heat. And if you start thinking like that, you're going to open your mind up to all kinds of systems in your house that you never thought about before. And that's how you truly prep. Way beyond just a bucket of beans and rice.
Yeah. We're way past a bucket of beans and rice at this point.
Well, and I can tell you, we had some friends who moved, and they couldn't take all of their stuff with them, and they gave us a lot of their beans. In fact, the bag of rice we have sitting there is from them, and we have 2 more in the basement. But we had them in a plastic container, and the container got cracked, and water got into it. And so it was awful, because we opened that lid and we're like, whoa! Like, and
it smelled terrible.
And it smelled horrible. So, knowing that, okay, we can't use these now because that's kind of gross, but knowing how to store stuff too, I think would be important in that, because we thought we had it down, and we didn't.
Well, in a basement that gathers water, there's no such thing as dry storage. You have to find a different way of storing it, and so that's one of the predicaments we have to solve. Because our basement does take on water.
And there's no dry storage in the attic either if you have a leaky roof.
That's right. That's right.
So last, I want to say, once you get it all together, well, make a plan. Okay, go through the house, look at all the systems, write them all down, make a plan. Once you have that plan together, test your system.
Okay.
How do you do that? You go into your main power box in your house, and you flip the main breaker, turn all the power off in the entire house for 24 hours.
Wow.
And when it's done, then you can turn it back on and keep going.
That's a great idea.
Test your system. You can start just testing in an evening. Say, okay, at 6 o'clock, all the power's going out until 10. We'll turn it back on. See how you survive one evening without power. And then test 2 days, and then decide, okay, now we're going to test a week. And I guarantee you, if you have holes in your system, you'll find them.
Absolutely.
I would think one of those holes would be, I was just thinking of this, like an alarm clock. You'd have to go back to like a wind-up alarm clock, because everything else is run by electricity, and if you tested a system, someone's going to be late for work.
Now see, in our series, we have a 3-video series about all of this. I'm just hitting the highlights, but we go into a lot more detail, and that's one of the things that Elizabeth talks about is wind-up alarm clocks, wind-up clocks for your wall, that sort of thing. Now, many of us have battery ones that the battery lasts a year or 2 anyway. But, wind-up clocks, wind-up alarm clocks is a good idea.
Well, not to beat a dead horse here about the toilet thing, but if you live in the country, your toilet is powered by electricity because of the water and how it's brought into your home
Through a well.
and through a well. When we had a well, we lost our power. You could not flush the toilet.
We had to have a
You
bucket of
had
water.
to have a bucket of water ready to pour into the tank so you could flush it and it'd go down.
Right.
You've got to think that stuff through. That's a part of the system.
But when you live in the country, depending on how much land and trees you have, for boys, the world is your bathroom. So.
Well, if you live in the country, you can dig a pit and make an outhouse.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
Dig a pit and put a screen around it.
Absolutely.
So when you test your system, you don't decide, okay, Saturday morning we're going to turn off the power. So Friday evening, let's go to the grocery store and get everything we need to get through the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What you do, take a pair of dice and you decide if I roll a 7, then the power's out for 48 hours.
Mm.
And so you're not prepared ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Every morning you get up and roll the dice.
Oh, wow.
If you get a 7, you go turn the power off. Emergency, power's gone. Now we're relying on our preps.
Right.
For 48 hours or 72 hours or 2 weeks or whatever you decide to do.
That's smart.
Test your system by turning the power off and see where the holes are in your system. Now obviously you still got to get to work, you know, and if you live across town, obviously you're still going to have to drive your car, you know, that sort of thing. But test it as realistically as you can, at least within your home.
That's a really smart idea.
And that's the best way to find out where the holes in your system are.
That's smart.
So.
Good. Well, guys, there you go. There's some nuggets of wisdom from the man himself, Bill from Tiny House. Yes, you. Tiny House Prepper. And please go and check out their channel. And there's so much there to watch. There's so much wealth of information. But this topic in particular is how to start prepping is the series. And we'll have a link put down below so you guys can just click on it and go right to that playlist.
Yeah, we have a playlist of how to start prepping. It has 3 videos in it. We talk about all of this stuff, but we go into a lot more depth.
Absolutely. And guys, if you have any questions, as always, feel free to email us at info.goinbatty@gmail.com. Check out our Facebook page, and by all means, if you like what you see, hit that like button. And if you didn't, well, just keep that to yourself. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. And as always, more updates as we go.
Bye.
What are you doing there? Time.